So next we have Sarma Velamuri, MD, who is the co-founder and CEO of Luminare. Luminare is a renowned he is a renowned sepsis expert committed to reducing sepsis as a leading cause of hospital deaths. With board certifications and extensive experience, he's been recognized for his contributions, including leadership roles at esteemed institutions such as BCM, CHI, and HCA. So with that, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Appreciate Uli and the InnovatorMD team for having me. Thank you. Didn't realize this was a startup pitch, but I want to make it work. So I'd like to tell you a story. I'm a recovering physician, so I'm board certified in internal medicine, mostly did transplant medicine, heart, lung, liver transplant as a hospitalist and prosthetic hearts. Ended up on the hospital sepsis committee, and several of you know the story. One day I admitted my friend's daughter, Emily, to my ICU for a lung and liver transplant, recused myself from care, went home for the night, came back the next morning and she was coding, her heart stopped. And my team was doing chest compressions on this kid. So I jump in, I help with resuscitation. And 45 minutes later, I had to go tell my friend his daughter died of septic shock. So I went home that day, realized that the team didn't fail her, the tech failed her. And so I quit my job, mortgaged the house, and started a tech company. So what I'm going to talk to you about is why AI is a great servant, but a very bad master. Everyone's heard about sepsis is the body's abnormal response to infection. Number one cause of death in the hospital. 1 in 3 people who die in a hospital die of sepsis. This is enormous expense in lives, but also 20 billion in wasted resources. Thankfully, this is also a huge opportunity as a capitalist for market improvement. So the big question is, why hasn't the EHR system, why hasn't Epic and Cerner and all these other very smart people already solved sepsis? The reason is there's a functionality present in the medical record system and this clinical workflow, and there's a technological gap. And I'm going to talk about this technology gap, how we solve it, and then what happens to patients when we do that. So the health system has focused on this gap and wanted to address this gap with deep learning artificial intelligence as the only answer to this problem. But deep learning AI is by itself not enough. What you really need to solve sepsis is 2 separate types of intelligence systems. You need an expert system, AI, which is used in clinical workflow, and you need a deep learning AI that does continuous risk monitoring. The problem is we put the cart before the horse so far. We built the second without building the first. So what we decided was to do this in the right order, build the expert system first, and then build the deep learning tool. So let me tell you why deep learning AI fails. This is an example of what happens in a hospital. There's information in the medical record. The patient develops sepsis at 2 a.m., let's say, an alarm goes off at 2:01 a.m. because the deep learning system picked it up. But the nurse is not in the medical record. They're busy taking care of a crashing patient. 2 hours later, they come and see a pop-up alert in the record. They hit accept. Another, the nurse gets called back to the crashing patient. And then at shift change, they realize, wait a second, this patient has developed sepsis. Now, for every hour that you wait, mortality goes up 7%. You wait 5 hours, mortality just went up 35%. Septic shock mortality today in the United States is 35%. I just gave you one example. There's numerous examples for why deep learning fails. Here's how complex the sepsis problem is. It's not just about sepsis prediction. It's got a lot of things to do with where the patient's located, the provider, the comorbidities of the patient, and lots of things influencing this. This is what deep learning addresses. Deep learning AI addresses sepsis prediction. Expert system AIs address the whole problem. It's not so good at predicting, but it addresses the whole problem. So what is an expert system and how does it work? An expert system basically simulates the judgment of an expert doctor. Like I see Dr. Guetta from MD Anderson on this call, Dr. Gaeta, and it simulates what experienced nurses would do when they see a patient. So it's like identifying a patient is like putting together a very complex puzzle with a group of people doing this puzzle. So what an expert system AI does is it's software that will address both the identification problem and the intervention problem. If you're not able to identify patients with sepsis, you can't treat them. If you identify patients with sepsis and you don't treat them, you don't change outcomes. So an expert system AI has got to do both. So the system we built does both. It uses the information from the medical record as it adds what the nurse sees at bedside, fills in the communication gap, and then automates the treatment for the patient, all inside the medical record system. And workflow at bedside, how software plugs into what the nurses and doctors do, is the key intervention that changes sepsis outcomes. Let me tell you a little bit about what happens after we built and deployed this. Our flagship deployment is the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. It's a 1,000-bed hospital. It's an epic shop, fantastic team. Number 2 by quality, already has great sepsis outcomes. We started working with them to improve their sepsis, deployed our software solution into Epic, and the nurses loved it. These are comments from actual nurses. And if you see, what they're saying is, this expert system comes alongside me and helps me do the heavy lifting. So this is an example of an AI tool that makes the nurse's life easier. You detect the patients early, you shift the curve to the left. Everybody now knows what shift to the left means because of COVID. And so you catch patients really early before they get into septic shock. This is publicly reported data. In the first 90 days of deployment of our expert system, septic shock mortality at Cedars-Sinai fell by 25%. And this is on Vizient, so you can, if you have access to Vizient, you can go look it up. And this is important because in AI, in software, it's hard to prove that you did something and there was a clinical outcome. Our system has been used in the public health space on over 9 million patients today. This expert system AI that I've been talking about at Workflow across 28 counties, and during the pandemic was used by FEMA, US Army for PCR management, PCR testing management, and vaccine management. We've signed several strategic partners, including NTD Data, Texas Medical Centers Innovation Institute, and of course the Cedars-Sinai Accelerator. We are now in Epic on available to any hospital that's on Epic. We're working on several other EHR systems. No matter how good software I build, a real competitive advantage is our team. I told you about myself. Marcus Rydberg is our CTO. He's from Sweden. He's had a previous exit in his company. James Hearn is our VP of Ops, runs customer success, has 18 years experience, Six Sigma Black Belt working in healthcare. We have a corporate controller. We behave as though we're publicly traded, having raised about 8.1 million in funding to date. And Taylor Game is our head of marketing and communications. My company's mission and vision is to stop sepsis faster without creating more work for nurses at bedside. After we do this, we're going to go attack heart failure, stroke, and other disease conditions using the same approach towards technology. I'm going to stop here and look for questions.
Great, we've got 5 minutes for questions.
Fantastic. What are some of the challenges you have been overcoming?
Great question. Several challenges. The first one is when I started, people said it wouldn't work. Because in order for an expert system to work, you have to have the nurses use it. And nurses are already so busy, going to them and saying, here's a software solution I want you to use on every single patient is really hard. Thankfully, we are at 80% compliant, so getting nurse adoption is really hard. The second challenge we face is scaling. So my team is 19 people right now. You're looking at our lead sales guy. And so we're working on adding people to our team and working on figuring out a repeatable sales model before we go to our Series A. Third challenge is sepsis means different to different things, to different people. So we're looking for those hospitals that want to solve sepsis, that acknowledge that maybe they're doing well, but can they do better? And have the time, bandwidth, and budget to fix that.
Any other questions from our judges? I see a couple in the chat that we can. That might help.
Go ahead. Very quickly, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure if I understood the product completely or from this short presentation, but what exactly, when you say, nurse did not see it because the nurse is somewhere else and all of that, how do you solve all of that? Or is it like, now you guys are putting in orders and things are getting done?
You broke up a little bit towards the end, but
yeah, what is the key change that you guys created in the model that's happening? I think I missed that.
Yeah, got it. The key change we've made is we're introducing a new workflow for the nurse. today in the EPIC or the EHR model, there's an alarm going off in the medical record. That's how we approach sepsis. The problem is when the alarm goes off, the nurse does not know why the alarm went off. It just says sepsis. It's up to them to go do a scavenger hunt in the medical record, figure out why the patient has sepsis, and then play phone tag with the providers. That's existing state. What we did was, instead of doing the scavenger hunt, we brought all the information to the nurse, assimilated the information, said, here's what's wrong, press this button, we will call the right people. Press this other button, it'll help you implement the orders. So from detection to treatment shortens from 7 hours to less than 60 minutes.
Got it. All right. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Any other questions from our judges?
Questions to kind of a business model then. So you're selling into hospital systems as the payers for it, or are you going kind of like reimbursement or payers?
Great question. We're currently selling directly to providers. Our payer play is we're working with a large payer whose name sounds like a color. It's not red, it's the other color, to get a DRG code add-on so that they can go to their providers and say, hey, if you use Luminare, we'll actually pay you more per DRG code with sepsis because we know your patients will get out of the hospital faster.
Any final questions? There are a few questions. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, how many hospitals or health systems are using this?
We are in 3 health systems right now.
Okay.
We've launched at single sites, but each health system has between 70 to, like Cedars only has 5 hospitals, but the other 2 have about 90 each. So we've landed in those 3 first. And these are enterprise contracts.
Well, thank you so much. So